And even I think we're going to start off with some news from Alex. I think we got, I don't know if, does everybody here know what Lolly is? No? Okay, so.
If not, download it, please.
Yeah.
Earn some free Bitcoin.
So I guess Alex will start us off by explaining what Lolly is and what news he just has about it today.
Yeah, so Lolly is a rewards application that lets people earn Bitcoin when they shop online. We have over 750 merchants, and we are announcing that we just partnered with Adidas. So if you're in the market for some new shoes, you can earn 6% back in Bitcoin, real Bitcoin.
Yeah, so basically you just shop the way that you would regularly shop, and you earn Bitcoin as a reward, small amounts of Bitcoin. Ooh. So can you guys also, Trevor and Joe, can you tell me a little bit about, from your experience, what are the challenges between crypto companies and merchants, and how have you overcome that in your own personal work? Trevor, you want to start?
Sure. So Flexa is a company that makes it easy for you to spend cryptocurrency in stores, and it helps take care of a lot of the issues that merchants typically have accepting cryptocurrency by converting it directly to fiat. So we kind of do almost a complimentary service for people who want to use the Lolly application. Once you've earned and stacked your sats, then you can take them back and spend them in the store.
Can everybody hear us okay, by the way? Awesome. Okay, cool. Sorry.
No, not at all. We launched with 15 merchant partners on Monday at this conference, and we released an app called Spedin, which allows you to try the Flexa network for yourself. If you pull out your conference packet, you have a Spedin invite code, and you can download it in the iOS App Store. But to answer your question, Lee, we have found that probably the biggest hurdle we face when talking to merchants about crypto is fear, and then sort of hand in hand with that, education. A lot of merchants, especially the large merchants, think of cryptocurrency as a very threatening thing because they know of it and hear of it as something that drug dealers and criminals use. And so trying to help them get over that hurdle and show them that digital money is better is something that we face a lot from an educational perspective.
Joe, I know that you work a lot with payment processing and also just with data networks. Can you tell me a little bit from your perspective what it's been like as you've been trying to educate these different partners across the space?
Yeah, so I've been in Bitcoin since 2010, and so the landscape's changed pretty drastically, in I think a positive direction. But I think there's a few really important things. Like it comes down to what type of infrastructure is being built. It's about making the experience, whether it's for users from a consumer perspective, or the actual merchants themselves. What's the simplicity that is required, and is the technology and infrastructure there? That's really what we spent a lot of time on over the last kind of 2 years across more on the identity and data side. But I mean, I think ultimately it's getting easier, and it's also just a matter of time. They're starting to get a lot more understanding of risks and of course rewards, and I think that's starting to iron itself out. But a couple more years until we're really there.
Yeah. Speaking of risks and rewards, Trevor, when you're talking to merchants, especially for brick and mortar retailers, what are the benefits of them being able to accept via an app digital money?
Well, I think the benefits of accepting digital money are manifold. It's better in almost every way. You think about how expensive it is for merchants to handle cash, for example, and it's something that you don't really consider, but all of the armored trucks have to pull up and take the cash to the bank, and then the bank's charging all these extraneous fees. It's expensive. And digital money is actually cheaper. So when you can look at things like stablecoins and take care of the volatility, like we partnered with Gemini as well, and we support the Gemini dollar, well, now you have something that is truly easier, cheaper, better for them in almost every single way. And not to mention it's borderless. So there's some really, really interesting things to do to help merchants really just reduce their costs across the board, because there are so many middlemen in the existing system, and digital money cuts all of that out. It's a much better system all around.
Gotcha. So you mentioned something of volatility. Alex, I'd love to hear from you as well. How do you handle the volatility of cryptocurrency when you're working with merchants and also shoppers that think in fiat prices?
Yeah, so we're kind of lucky to be a little bit immune to it, and it's sort of a feature, not a bug for us.
Nice.
So I think a lot of people are here now because of the principles of Bitcoin and the principles of crypto. But we all probably were attracted to it because we were like, okay, we could probably make a little bit of money from this. Is it really interesting? And so price, I think, attracts people to the space, and then the principles engage people and keep people in the space. And so we're seeing about 50% of our users have never had Bitcoin before, have never had any crypto. And so our job is to educate them on the volatility, on why, why it's important and why it's okay. But for them, they're looking at it as like, if I'm going to get $5 in cash or if I'm going to get $5 in Bitcoin, $5 in Bitcoin to even people in Middle America, back home in North Carolina, people are really excited about it being like a hope of something more and this sort of like lottery ticket almost. And that's okay for us because as long as that $5 like piques their interest and they're willing to learn more, it's up to us to like educate them with content marketing, with like videos, with educational content that will let them learn why it's important, what the principles of it are, and then so that later they can pay with it and they can reduce the fees for merchants.
Gotcha. Trevor, have you also had a similar experience when it comes to working with merchants that think in fiat prices?
Yeah, it's one of the main reasons why we only allow merchants to take fiat out of the system for the time being. And we also only present the fiat spending power inside of the app. So we don't actually show you your Bitcoin balance on the main part of the screen. It's always shown in fiat just to try and make the friction at the checkout as possible.
Yeah.
One thing I will add is that it's local fiat. So if you think about spending with your Bitcoin balance in some place like China, it just gets really interesting to have the renminbi price instead. And now you're going maybe on a trip to the UK and now you're seeing the pounds price. And so this is local spending power, but it's not actually stored in that balance or in that type of fiat. And it's just sort of mind-blowing. Excuse me. Sort of mind-blowing once you break that down because suddenly you're not taking care of foreign exchange fees for merchants or you're doing anything around paying fees yourself as a consumer. I feel like my mic keeps going in and out. I don't know if that's just me. I'll try not to move my head. But it's just, we're on the cusp of something new and very different because we're playing with digital money that for the first time is actually built on a digital platform, whereas everything else existed and was created, and even credit cards were invented before the internet. And so now we have something that's happened and really been developed from start to finish in the era of the internet, and it fits and it works and it's just so much better.
Gotcha. Joe, you had talked about it still having a long way to go in terms of mainstream adoption. Where do you think there's the most room for growth in the near future? So maybe like this year or the next 2 years.
I think that the growth will come from the simplest things, right? Like I think like just the simple like buying and starting to understand more from like a mass consumer perspective, what Bitcoin is and how it works. I still think we have a very long way to go in that context. Branching out into more things like gaming, I think, is interesting, but I just do think it will take time to really, figure out what that, killer use case or killer app is. But ultimately, I think Bitcoin's kind of, is the killer app, and I think that, I don't think we should underestimate, what that killer app is. And so, I kind of think that the more onboarding and just simplicity that, both of your companies actually are bringing is like pretty much what you need in order to bring the next billion people onto the networks. So.
Yeah. Definitely, for example, for lolly shoppers, being able to earn Bitcoin with very low risk makes a lot of sense. Have you noticed yet which brands are the most popular among lolly shoppers so far?
Yeah, so travel's been a really incredible category for us. We have retailers like, merchants like Priceline, Booking.com that let people get flights, hotels. I think we're all here. A lot of us are here from outside of New York. And so, yeah, I think it's just sort of like a ritual that people can use. Groceries have been really big. One of our biggest partners is Walmart and Jet. They've been incredible in this sort of like fight against Amazon. We're emerging at this time when everyone's looking for something to differentiate themselves from Amazon. And while we're friends with the Amazon team and we want to engage them and we would love if Amazon gave people Bitcoin for shopping online because it would open things up, it's actually enabling all these other merchants to compete against them and decentralize retail. So that's been really exciting for us to really like focus on all the other merchants. And that was the big thing with my last company too. You can build a really good business off of creating solutions that help merchants fight against Amazon and sort of like distribute the wealth a little bit. So we've been enjoying that. And then, yeah, Adidas is going to be really cool for like direct brands. We've seen Everlane do amazing. We're in deep talks with Glossier that I'm very excited about. My sister is too. So yeah.
Awesome. So you mentioned competition, right? And that's something that definitely drives a lot of business adoption. Trevor, do you have any thoughts about what kinds of merchants have the biggest challenges with chargebacks or security, or the things that digital money in general are really good at?
Yeah, so I started my payments career at Amex on the merchant acceptance side, and there were some types of categories that were either charged exorbitantly high fees or just not accepted at all. Some friends of ours over at Bolt are actually working on some of these problems right now. Categories like adult entertainment, jewelry, online tickets, dating apps, surprisingly. Well, Ashley Madison, I guess, not so surprising. Those sorts of things are very, very prone to chargebacks, and they're considered very high-risk merchants. What's interesting about this is that they'll have a relationship with an entity called a merchant acquirer. So they actually deal with them, but they can be blacklisted further up the chain. And getting removed from those blacklists is incredibly difficult because there are sometimes 1 or 2 year blacklists attached to your address and your phone number. It's almost like this credit system for merchants.
Wow.
And if you're a small merchant business just barely getting started and someone exploits your system and you get a bunch of fraud and chargebacks, you're out. Basically, you can't succeed for the next 2 months unless you completely rebrand your business and maybe even start over with new EIN.
So smaller and medium businesses really can benefit directly from working with crypto companies.
Absolutely. And even just since our announcement on Monday, we've seen so much inbound interest. There's a pizza joint 2 blocks from my apartment who emailed saying, I've been trying to accept crypto at my business for years. Like, please sign me up. And so that's just, the small merchant pain is felt very, very, very closely, I think, by a lot of folks.
Joe, I know you sometimes work with payment processors and other people that are more on the infrastructure side. What have you learned about their needs and challenges and even opportunities when it comes to getting involved, even indirectly, with the crypto ecosystem?
I think that it's at one level a technical question, and I think that's largely being resolved. But I actually think the bigger thing when you're dealing with the very large payment processors, we do a lot of work with PaySafe, which is one of the biggest processors probably in the world today, is actually the regulatory question. So it's actually not even just an infrastructure question. It's, we work in 200 plus countries, and you have all of these differences in obviously requirements. And if there's a lot of unknowns, it's very hard for them to deploy this across their entire infrastructure. And so that's kind of, I think, been the biggest one, which again comes down to the risk question. I think largely it's getting a bit more clear now, and they're starting to kind of start making more moves into the space, but that's mainly been the challenge, I think.
And what do you think is coming up for you over the next 6 months, even at Shift, in terms of building out or growing that infrastructure?
Yeah, so we're launching our main network in about a month. We spent about 2 years working on it. We signed a deal with the Bermudan government, and so we're going into phase 1 for their identity system for their country in the next month. And then we'll be announcing 2 more countries that bring on another 110 million people over the next year. So much more into the identity.
That's a lot.
So, yeah, lots of work.
Have any of you guys ever shopped with your crypto personally? What'd you buy? What was the experience like?
I used my last purchase was a Lightning Network purchase for some lollipop art from one of our Twitter followers.
Nice.
Nice.
And yeah, I'll send a pic out later. I haven't posted that yet, but yeah, it was kind of fun. We have like really engaged Twitter community if anyone wants to follow us. And yeah, we had someone reach out that was doing some cool art, and we bought some lollipop art. It was fun.
So we know what Shift is up to. We know that Adidas is one of the newest brands to join Lolly's ecosystem. Trevor, what is Flexa going to be doing over the next 6 months in terms of growth, whether it's assets or regions or target audiences?
All of the above.
Oh.
Yeah, the goal is more coins. And I think the Litecoin folks will be happy to hear that we're at least open to exploring other coins. Maybe stop bothering us on Twitter. More countries. We're looking to explore some other areas of the world in addition to the United States. The long-term goal is any coin, any store, any country, any fiat. So as long as we can keep focusing on helping merchants accept cryptocurrency, I think we'll be looking for that widespread adoption everywhere.
So like any store, any country, any fiat. That would mean that if I were to go on vacation, for example, I would just need to bring my app with me, and I could go shopping there at stores without needing to go to a currency converter.
Bring whatever crypto you want, spend it wherever you are, and the merchant gets local fiat. Exactly.
That is a very interesting goal. Alex, when it comes to Lolly, are you also thinking about expansion, whether that's with demographic or service, or even with ability with the wallet? Can people cash out their stats yet? And if not, then where is that on the roadmap?
Oh yeah, you can withdraw to any Bitcoin address. You just have to hit the $15 threshold, so pretty low threshold. People normally hit it in like 2 purchases. And so yeah, that was, when we launched, we didn't have that because we were like, okay, there's no Bitcoin in your wallet to withdraw. Yeah. And so the community was like, well, we need to be able to withdraw. And we're like, we got you. So we launched it in like a month, but it was, yeah, you can withdraw. And then you can also withdraw to any US dollar bank account for a lot of our new users. So a lot of our users have, like, the cool thing I think that we've seen is like these people who are new to crypto, they came in at 3,500 when we launched and they started earning, and now it's up to 8K. And so these new users have already been sort of like trained, I guess, and so they're sharing this with all their friends and saying, this is twice as good as Ebates. This is like twice as good as all these other cash back companies. And with our average percent back is 7%, it's effectively 14% for those early users. So it's this like positive feedback loop of like encouraging people to pay attention to Bitcoin that's not just about price, it's about earning.
Gotcha. What have you learned in terms of what users need in order to be onboarded into the system? Because I know a lot of your users are first-time Bitcoin holders.
Yeah, that's a great question. We've learned a lot about like where our users are, and this is my last company was an enterprise company, so a lot of it has been a lot of new learnings and just spray and pray. We've been working with some really cool influencers that are going to, I think, really humanize Bitcoin. So we're going to be rolling that out over the next 3 months or so. Really testing with a wide range of influencers that have very engaged audiences that trust them, and so I'm pretty excited about that. I think that like a lot of, sort of enabling like our like Bitcoin users through our technology has been, I think, the most effective thing. I think Lolly is the first application that you can share with a friend that has never had Bitcoin and they understand it. And a lot of that came from, like, my mom was like texting me and being like, should I invest in Bitcoin? My sister was like asking, and I had a whole text thread of like, should I buy, should I buy? And to this day, I've never given financial advice, even though my friends are probably pissed at me that I didn't tell them to buy Bitcoin. I just have a moral issue with giving financial advice and probably a legal issue as well. But I was like, okay, I was at Ebates, I had pitched them this idea, they didn't want to do it, and I was like, okay, like, so our team and I, we parted ways, and we rebuilt Ebates for Bitcoin with the same team, and a lot of that was like because people kept demanding like to get into Bitcoin, and this is the easiest way. Everybody shops online, everybody shops in store, it's just like a no-brainer for most people. So positioning it alongside with points has been the most effective to fully answer your question for both merchants and users. When we go to a merchant, we don't try to convince them like to accept the payment. I think that these are some great solutions for that. With my last company, it took us a really long time, really long sales cycle, and it was very difficult to convince a retailer to spend that much effort to attract a new user base. With us, we come in and we say, look, we're going to send you our thousands and thousands of users that want Bitcoin more than they want cash. We're also going to align you with a tech-savvy young millennial consumer, which every merchant wants. And so when we come in, we position ourselves with point systems, and they're very familiar with point systems. And we only say, like, Bitcoin's like a point system, but it's available to everybody in the world, and we don't control the rules. And so they kind of love that.
Awesome. I really hear from you guys a lot of like meeting consumers and merchants where they're at, and then helping them onboard into the system as opposed to trying to bring them into the system straight. Joe, as our resident Bitcoin veteran, I'd really love to hear from you your thoughts on the dichotomy between medium of exchange versus store of value. Where do you think that shopping plays into Bitcoin's usability? Do you think these are mutually exclusive, or are they one and the same?
I think that you need one in order to have the other. And I think that that's the important thing, right? Like in any market, like liquidity wins. And which means that you need liquidity, you need store in order to now make it useful. And so I kind of look at this wider kind of utility, or how do you actually utilize Bitcoin is the best example, based on applications like this that are starting to take shape. But it doesn't work if you don't have an initial pool of liquidity, and that liquidity is not continuing to grow. And so I kind of look at the retail side as kind of like the second layer on top of core infrastructure that has to allow scalability to happen, ease of payment transaction finality, et cetera. Which I think is happening, and now we can start really making use cases like these really start to work. But I mean, with 3-4 years ago, when we tried to attempt this early on, it was just way too early. Like, there was no adoption. People don't know, how Bitcoin works, and unless you solve that experience problem and the actual infrastructure, underneath it, it doesn't work. So I think we're now entering the phase where this will really start to actually, make sense.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense to me. I have a lot of questions for these guys, and I could do it all day, but I wanted to give an opportunity if anybody in the audience had a question for them. By show of hands, does anybody? I'll start over there, but then Christine will go to you.
So, one big problem as a user of Bitcoin is, I remember 3 years ago, bought a hotel on Expedia when they still accepted Bitcoin. And I would pay half a Bitcoin for 1 night stay, which is ridiculous at today's price. Price volatility. And the other big hurdle is the tax implication every time you spend a Bitcoin. Do you provide any tax guidance, or do you provide any kind of hedge against the volatility?
Trevor, that tax question is actually really excellent. I'd love to know that.
Sure. Do you have something you wanted to throw in really quick? One bit. I'm not an accountant, so talk to your accountant, but our rebates are non-taxable income. So all of our Bitcoin is effectively non-taxable. And so that's why we're focused on earning. I think it's a good way to get people into it. I think that we're going to have to wait on DC to try to figure out what the long-term tax implications are for buying and selling and converting. But yeah, that's our stance.
Yeah. So the question was about the problem of paying for the most expensive coffee or the most expensive plane flight in your entire life, and then also the tax implications and reporting. I guess I'll answer kind of backwards. So the IRS was one of the first government agencies in the US to actually move on saying something about crypto, and they decided that it was property. For their purposes, smart move, because it makes them a lot of money for those who self-report. We are fully compliant with that, and so we'll give you the information you need from the Flexa network to essentially tell you here were your tax events and your spend events. That being said, there's another half of this where we don't necessarily think this is the right thing for cryptocurrency adoption, and even for the merchants themselves. So we're working on some legislative support, doing things like supporting the Coin Center and others to try and ensure that as lobbyists are approaching these issues, and then also as legislators are approaching these issues, they're looking at them with a fully informed view. And then going back to the first part of your question, how do you avoid the volatility? It goes back to sort of the question around Bitcoin's original use, and I like to think of Satoshi as envisioning Bitcoin as money, store of value, unit of account, medium of exchange. And it seems like the more folks who come into the system, the more that shifts, but it shifts based on the aims and the goals of the people involved. So if you have speculative investors, well, of course, they're interested in store of value. And so the unit vector shifts a little bit more toward store of value. But as more and more folks adopt cryptocurrencies to spend, I think even for Bitcoin, that vector will shift a little bit more towards medium of exchange and maybe even unit of account, just because it's proven. And it's proven that folks want to spend, let's say, stable enough cryptocurrencies. We have stable coins right now, which are fiat pegged. That'll work in certain markets, but maybe next we can have a stable enough cryptocurrency that's not pegged. Because pegs break. Maybe we can have something that you can take with you because you live on a border town and you can go back and forth between countries and spend that currency and it's not attached to anything. But we're at the infancy of all that. It's such a nascent industry still, and sometimes we lose sight of the fact that there's probably another 99% of people in our total addressable market who have never even heard of crypto yet, or Bitcoin. And once we can reach them, we can actually realize what this is all supposed to be for. So I hope that's a satisfying answer. I don't know if I really hit on your point of the most expensive copy you've ever bought. I think maybe that's a price we pay as early adopters before we figure it all out collectively.
Christine, did you have a question?
My question relates a little bit about the partnership concept that you had talked about at the beginning. Do you want to explain a little bit more about what it means for Adidas to come on board to the Login network, and just how users will be interacting with the Adidas products?
So how we bring on most of our direct partners, we reach out to them. And a little bit of backstory. My last company started 7 years ago, same team. We built, I would say, knocked on just about every door at every retailer in North America at some point and talked to probably about 50% of them. So a lot of them is just like calling up the same old contacts that I've been working with for 7 years. And so we had a relationship with Adidas. They were playing hard to get, and for the last 7 months. And I think they saw a lot of our traction. They saw that there is a massive community that wants Bitcoin and that is excited. I mean, we're all here, and we have thousands of users to show. We have a lot of data to show around all these other merchants, case studies about how well they're doing. We have similar comps with like Everlane's one of our top partners. It's a single brand retailer. It's for a millennial consumer. It's doing really, really well right now for us. And they're not on Ebates. They're not on Honey. They're not on any of these other platforms. So yeah, we came to Adidas and we said, hey, join us and like we'll send you customers and sales. And they gave us a great rate and we passed that off to our consumer.
Was there any last questions in the audience that we wanted to ask? Going once, going twice. In the back? No? Okay. Awesome. Then I guess I wanted to spend a minute to think about that, the idea about volatility and deciding where it is that we spend our Bitcoin, because I think it's a really valid point. Joe, for you, when you think about when you want to spend Bitcoin or when you want to donate Bitcoin, what are the choices that go in your mind? Thinking like, okay, I could hold on to this and it could be worth a lot more in a little bit, but also I want to encourage adoption and I want to encourage more diversity in terms of the audience.
So my personal rule is to never spend your Bitcoin.
You never spend your Bitcoin, okay.
But that's a personal, as little as possible. But I mean, no, I think it's, there's a trade-off, right? And I think it's a tough question, right? Like, I have never actually won by spending Bitcoin.
Really?
Well, yeah, because like, if you look at the last historical 7 years, it's, hodling has done well for those that have chosen to do so. But I mean, I think that it really depends on like what the core use cases are. And I also think that as Bitcoin starts to stabilize with kind of a bit of a higher price, it'll be a lot easier to kind of let go with certain amounts of Bitcoin. And I think like moving towards Satoshis and units that are in smaller quantities is an easier approach, but I personally avoid spending Bitcoin.
I think that's great. It's good to have decisions that you make for yourself, whether or not you want to spend your Bitcoin. I'm going to push back against you a little bit. I love spending my Bitcoin, and I love spending my Bitcoin on companies that are run by women that I think are doing ethical things. I think that's a way for me to show with my feet, with my wallet, what it is I believe in. When you think about the future of Flexa, could there be a potential future in which the merchant could decide to hold crypto as opposed to cashing out in fiat? Can you tell me about that?
Absolutely. I think that's the long-term dream. You talked earlier about meeting merchants where they are. And right now we've just found that because of the accounting questions and the tax reporting themselves, it's too onerous because of the security. We found that merchants sometimes can't be trusted by themselves to hold their own user information, and it gets breached all the time. So imagine them storing private keys. It's crazy. There might need to be a solution, and this is kind of a challenge, just around privacy coins, and maybe privacy coins that can be received while something like Bitcoin is actually what's being used to pay. Because merchants don't want their data on the blockchain for their competitors to find.
That makes sense.
When you're making a payment on the Bitcoin blockchain to a merchant, and that merchant's public address is shown on the website, if it's not mixed, if it's not filtered in some way, their competitors can come along and get a very, very detailed view of all of their economics. So for those and other reasons, we just don't think that the solution is right there for merchants yet, but we do want merchants eventually to be able to accept crypto, and we think that by building a close and trusting relationship with them, we can get them close to that.
I hadn't even thought about that, about privacy as a shopper, right? Like Amazon knows so much about me because it knows everything that I buy. If I was able to purchase things with cryptocurrency, maybe a few retailers would have just a little bit less information about me personally. Is there anything, last minute thoughts that you guys wanted to leave us with before we hand it over?
I did want to add a point on what you guys were saying is, like, I think it's really important just in life to understand what everybody's optimizing for. And with merchants, as they both noted, they're optimizing to reduce chargebacks, and the consumer's getting really savvy. I think just like you look at a customer in the Midwest that even used like Ebates previously, like that consumer is like scouring the web. They're finding the best deals, the best coupons, and they're getting that like at that merchant. What they don't realize is like how much the merchant's paying for chargebacks and how much they're paying for credit card fees, how much waste there is in just that whole entire process. Like you guys had a beautiful diagram of that was just like, it showed how many middlemen there are in this entire messed up process with payments that's just not needed now that we've created this better currency. And so there's companies out there like Everlane that are doing really well by being very transparent organizations. And a lot of what they talk about is transparency in marketing. Like where are we making our money off of you, and where are we making it off the supply chain? And the next part's where are we making it off of payments? So a lot of our international merchants have actually, their interest has been piqued because international chargebacks are like 10+%. And if you can introduce an immutable currency that also reduces chargebacks and has essentially no credit card fees or no fees, that's kind of a perfect world for them. So I think that's where we're going to see a lot of adoption with payments. Because you're going to be optimized, the merchants are going to be optimizing to decrease the price, and as soon as you can start to see these like parallels where it's like I'm just picturing this UI like juxtaposed where it's like, earn an extra 10% back by buying this order with Bitcoin, earn an extra 2% if you pay with Bitcoin. Those are the kind of things that are going to get really exciting for consumer adoption and merchant adoption and make the entire world more transparent. And I think the average consumer is ready for that, given how savvy we see that they are.
Awesome. So this was really inspiring. Thank you so much for joining me today, guys.